Thank you very much. So, my name is Peter Murphy from the Politics of the Club Committee. I'm glad to be back at Harold Park Hotel. Thanks to Jason. So, first of all, especially tonight, but every night, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, pay respect to their elders past and present, and I warmly welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. And especially welcome to this session at Harold Park Hotel. We're back here after several years, and thanks to the manager Jason and his strong support for politics in the pub here. So the topic tonight is after the Voice Referendum 2023, making our future. It's only 2 weeks and a couple of days since the 60-40 defeat of the Voice Referendum nationwide and in the 6 states. So there's nothing close about that result. Australian people, especially the First Nations of Australia, now have the reality writ large. After a week of quiet grieving, Indigenous leaders have begun to speak out, and a painful process is now underway to devise strategies to advance First Nations rights in this new political environment. We have 2 really great speakers tonight to unpack this topic. First will be Cathy Eatock, who's sitting here with me. She's the co-chair of the Indigenous Peoples Organisation Australia. She's a Gayeri and Bachelor woman with ancestral connections in the lands of central Queensland. Set up in 2006 after the abolition of ASIC, the IPO has supported Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander attendance at United Nations mechanisms and has led First Nations delegations. Cathy is also the elected Pacific representative to the Facilitative Working Group of the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change for the years 2022 to 25. The position requires Indigenous advocacy and coordination across the Pacific region and working with Indigenous and United Nations processes globally. The second speaker is Geoff Scott. He's a Wiradjuri man from Narromine in New South Wales with more than 30 years' experience working in Aboriginal affairs. Geoff's previous positions include the CEO of the Darkinjung Local Aboriginal Land Council, CEO of the National Congress of Australia's First Peoples, CEO of the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, Director General of the New South Wales Department of Aboriginal Affairs, and Deputy CEO of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission. Geoff was the Executive Officer to the Referendum Council and a key leader throughout the Uluru dialogue process. So you can see we've got really fine speakers tonight. And the first one to address us will be Cathy Eatock. So please welcome Cathy tonight.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to also acknowledge that we're meeting tonight on the lands of the Gadigal people, the Eora Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge all of our elders in the room, Geoff beside me, and any sisters and brothers who are here this evening. As Peter outlined, I'm co-chair of the Indigenous Peoples Organisation of Australia. That's rights-driven rights advocacy members-driven body and has around 360 individual and organisational members. We've just held a UN-mandated Pacific Indigenous Conference on climate change, which is getting pretty busy, so I'll just rely on a few of my notes I've scribbled down here, if you don't mind. So first of all, I think I'll provide a few remarks on the referendum and the reasons we believe it failed. So we have to acknowledge that the referendum shone a light on the racist underbelly of Australia and the fact that Australia hasn't really moved much beyond its colonial past. The level of Aboriginal deaths in custody, the appalling incarceration rates, the overcrowded housing, frequently with 20 people in a 3-bedroom house in remote communities, the fact that kids are dying of rheumatic heart failure, which is unheard of in non-Aboriginal communities, and that we have security companies being paid in the Northern Territory to clear Aboriginal people off the streets. We know that an army has been sent into Aboriginal communities with the Northern Territory intervention. We continue to be a people under siege and under enforced occupation, where the young lad killed in Uluru found, and the 16-year-old who took his life in WA last week also found that the police continue to act as an occupation force when it comes to Aboriginal people. It's the oppressive arm of a contemporary colonialism. It's that racism that has been emboldened with the referendum that historically enabled and justified the dispossession and massacres across this continent. And it's a racism which is still very much alive in this country. We have a lot of work to do. I heard disinformation myself driving back from my father's. I heard a national broadcaster talk on 2SM, telling his trusting audience that if the yes got up, each non-Aboriginal person would have to pay a $400 sovereignty tax. And none of those that rang questioned the truth of that statement. The lies varied depending on the audience. They told remote Aboriginal communities that if you vote no, you're voting no to fracking. We know the No campaign was funded by mining interests like Gina Reinhardt, and Twiggy Forrest was likely behind it too. We know too that funding and campaigning was also brought in from vested mining groups from overseas. The alt-right have funded campaigns against First Nations peoples in Canada and in the US. They know through the Trump, Brexit and Bolsonaro campaigns that it's relatively easy to swing national agendas. They fed the line that the voice was divisive and that somehow Aboriginal people would be getting preferential treatment. They were worried Aboriginal people might get something they can't get. Well, any Aboriginal person will confirm we already get preferential treatment. By the police, we get preferential treatment through the judicial system. Our children continue to get preferential treatment in being removed. Any negative social indicator will confirm that the Australian community is already well and truly divided. These divisions already exist. Life expectancy remains 8.6 years for men and 7.8 years for women, less if you're Indigenous, and rises to 14 years gap in remote communities. Poverty and poor living conditions contribute to high rates of cardiovascular disease at 18% in remote regions. Our kids are dying of rheumatic heart disease, with Aboriginal people making up 94% of the cases. Kidney disease and renal failure is 6.8 times the rate among non-Indigenous peoples and 18.6 times in the Northern Territory. While blindness, these statistics are important because it really emphasises the stark difference between Aboriginal communities and non-Indigenous. So blindness is 3 times the rate for non-Indigenous peoples, with trachoma caused by poor living conditions and overcrowding found in 4% of identified Aboriginal communities. And with Australia the only developed country in the world with trachoma. Diabetes continues to impact 13% of the Aboriginal population. Remote regions often lack the power to keep the insulin in the fridge. So we have a death rate 5.2 times that of non-Indigenous peoples as a result of diabetes. So yes, the country is already deeply divided. That's why the vast majority of the Australian population has no or little engagement with the Aboriginal community, because we remain on the edges of society. We remain in poverty on the fringes. We remain on the edges of rural communities and in remote communities where most non-Aboriginal Aboriginal people have ever been, and where racism often reaches another level of intensity. So unfortunately, many of the Australian community are ignorant of these facts and the history and legacy of massacres and dispossession. Aboriginal people are a small percentage, but are economically, socially and geographically distinct from mainstream Australia. And so most non-Aboriginal Australians have little or no contact with Aboriginal people. But it wasn't just the ignorant and hard right that voted no. There was also the so-called progressive no vote as well, which sometimes confused the mainstream left. People who sought to hold out for treaty first were actually inadvertently pushing treaty off the table, while a voice would have provided a chorus of support for treaty. With the Albanese government already committed to undertaking a treaty, the voice was actually the most direct path to treaty. Now, with the rejection of the voice, we've seen Queensland retreat from its treaty commitments, and New South Wales is now wavering. There was also concern about whether putting Aboriginal people in the Constitution would undermine our sovereignty. Of course, Aboriginal people are already in the Constitution in several racist clauses. But the legal fact is nothing can take away Aboriginal people's sovereignty. Our sovereignty is inherent. It comes from our ancestral connection to these lands. It may be suppressed through occupation, but it can never be forcibly removed. I want to highlight that these things are all connected. There's a direct correlation between the rejection of the referendum, the retreat of state treaties, and the recent death of that 16-year-old boy in WA. They're all connected. So where do we go from here? There are two critical elements of the statement of the heart which are yet to be implemented. One is truth-telling. We clearly need a concerted campaign of truth-telling to overcome the entrenched racism in this country. We need a national campaign to address the inherent and intergenerational racism that Adam Goods, just a few years ago, also highlighted that underbelly and that nothing has changed. Rather, the referendum has emboldened the racists. So we need the truth of this country to be told. People need to know that the wealth of this country comes from Aboriginal lands and Aboriginal blood. Rather, the Australian community should be proud of Aboriginal cultures and celebrate the 60,000 years of continuous history that designates us as the oldest living culture in the world. But we also have, as I was reminded when I was walking my dog the other day, a badge still displayed that he was part of an army of 60,000 people across the country who actively campaigned for the yes vote and who are ready to step up again in support of the assertion of First Nations rights. We need to get out on the streets in support of Aboriginal people. We need to let the state and federal governments know that there is support for First Nations peoples and that we need justice in this country. We need peace. We need to end the use of occupation forces. I myself have received death threats for taking Andrew Bolt to court with my mother at Eatock, who won that racial discrimination case against him back in 2012. Well, it gave her great satisfaction in the final years of her life. We both received death threats for asserting our rights. I also received death threats back in 2018 in organising a treaty march here in Sydney. I think most people here tonight might be surprised by the level of racism in this country. because those people who are our allies hang with like-minded friends. But it's clear we need to tackle it head-on through an intensive government-supported truth-telling campaign, one that doesn't just stop at the school gates, but seeks to educate the broader community. We also need to focus on the other aspects of the statement from the heart. We need to establish a Makarrata Commission to undertake a process of engagement with First Nations peoples around the country on whether they want a treaty and how it might be established. Australia remains the only former British colony without a treaty. A treaty can provide a framework for Indigenous self-determination. It can provide the reparations to establish our own governance structures. We need to focus on a national treaty and to push state governments to maintain their state-based treaties. While a treaty is legislated and doesn't have the protection of the Constitution, no treaty has ever been unlegislated because it's an agreement between two sovereigns. You need both parties to agree to undo it. Of course, treaties can be broken. History is littered with broken treaties, but contemporary treaties bring an expectation of honouring them. A Conservative government may ignore a negotiated treaty, but they will be hard-pressed to legislate for its removal, especially after a process of truth-telling. So in my view, the federal government needs to legislate for the Makarrata Commission and establish a process for engaging and empowering First Nations peoples to determine what we want to negotiate in a treaty, not on what the lowest common denominator will agree to give us. We have an elected Labor government, and the onus is now on them to move us beyond begging people for better treatment when we have ancestral rights to this country. The wealth of this country has been drawn from Aboriginal lands. The government has a fiduciary duty to recognise that and to fund our own governance bodies so we can fund our services and respond to the needs of our communities. It's only a national treaty that can provide the structural framework of real change to move beyond the oppression of contemporary colonialism to a shared post-colonial society, but we have a long way to go. We need to also counter the global campaign against Indigenous rights. First Nations peoples have inherent rights to reparations and land rights. The global endorsement of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples sets rights firmly in international law, with First Nations legal experts such as James Anaya asserting that with its almost universal adoption and the decades since, the Declaration has moved into the realm of customary international law. So like other international conventions, it's also enforceable. So in the coming months, we will call on you to stand with us in the assertion of our rights to sovereignty, our rights to self-determination, and our rights to freedom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cathy. Please give Cathy another round of applause. So let's welcome Geoff Scott now to speak. Exactly, walk around, I think. And when he's finished, we'll have a 10-minute break. People can get a drink, and then we'll come back for the Q&A. So, okay, Geoff, thank you.
Thank you. I just like to walk and talk, but it's a camera, so you can't follow me. First of all, I want to pay my respects to country. I want to go to country tonight. I respect their ancestors and elders. I'm a Wiradjuri man from Narromine. Go closer to the mic. And Narromine was my home, but I've heard 75% of those. I'm work out in West Had a few friends call up and said, no, it's not my home anymore. But moving on from that, thank you all for coming tonight, showing your interest and actually becoming part of this conversation going forward. And also reflecting on the past. So when the recognition has been a long struggle for Aboriginal people, it's not something new, it's been going on for decades. The managers itself at over, there's been 10 reports, about 4 joint committees. But in 2015, well, there was an attempt at recognising Aboriginal people along with everyone else in the preamble in 1999, which went down 37. Not John Howard's greatest successes. But even in that one, I don't know if you know what the No campaign slogan was. It was, if you don't know, vote no. And the 4 points after were the same as ones they used in this. So they didn't come up with anything new. They used what was tried and true, confused people. But the long struggle started, and in 2015 there was a curability statement issued by Aboriginal people which came back and said that symbolic recognition wasn't on the table. We wanted much more than it, we wanted structure reform. And then they set up the Referendum Council in 2015, I was the exec officer for that. And that was actually a brief from the Commonwealth Government to go back and consult about what recognition would look like. And what came back from that was through the Uluru, well, it came back from the Referendum Council report 2017, and that's where the Uluru statement was. It was a long process. The initial view from the government then, that became Prime Minister's interview, was that we should do it all online. So the submissions and people filling out questionnaires. We finally convinced the government that we need to go out and consult with people, and that's where the Uluru dialogues were. And well, I was part of the process. There were many people who criticised it, but it was the best process we had today. We tried to have 60 meetings to start with, but after Peter President told John Howard that he couldn't do that, we got 12. We went ahead with that 12, had a process which came up with the statement. In that process, people poured their hearts out about what was wrong and where things are at. And for people in 3 days to go through them, 101 the Constitution, 101 civics, get their head around all those issues and come out and make an informed decision. So a monumental task and a great process. We always commend that. In the end, they didn't want to change 5126 because it didn't matter how you changed, the government still using it. What brought that about was the intervention by Marsh Island, week, all used by Howard to push our rights back. And our rights have been going backwards since Howard came to power in 96. Continues to go. So the Referendum Council, and they didn't want an amendment to 5126. They didn't want a racial discrimination clause. We already had legislation which applied to everyone except the Commonwealth Government. And advice was it's in the Constitution, the Commonwealth Government would do the same. They called it a special measure. You can discriminate if it was for your good and for your own good. What came out of that process was the voice and treaty. So what was born from that was the voice, treaty, and truth telling. In that sequence. And the sequence is important because the path to treaty is still a voice. What that path is now is something that's already set and we go through. That came out of it. But the second point about it is that the people from dialogues and the convention actually made the point that we're sick of talking to politicians. It's time we spoke to people because we thought that people would understand us and go with us. We were a little wrong with that. A good 6 million people came with us. We should never forget that. And that their vote and their support needed to be diminished by their 60%. Always remember that one. That's where the Uluru dialogue came from, but it was actually an invitation of friendship and of love for the Australian people. There were many people on the night of referendum wanted to burn the state. Thankfully, it didn't happen. But many people wanted to walk away from many things, but people had to vent and get over the immense disappointment that came up from that night. We're moving on from that now. There was a week of silence. Again, we've moved on from that. And people are meeting now to try and sort out where we're going to. Cathy's out many of those measures, where we should go to, and what aspect we should do. But we should remember a couple of things. We would never have had the opportunity to go to a referendum if Albanese hadn't stood up and we won the election in May 2022 and said we're going to go to a referendum. We still should thank him for that. There's never a right time. We went ahead with it and we had the opportunity. We'd never had the opportunity to do it. At least now we know where we stand. I think going through it all, there's the question is pretty simple in the referendum itself. Is if you vote yes to actually recognise Aboriginal people as the first people of this country and to give us a voice in the matters that affect us. We voted no, then all the conditions denied voice. But no one, and now we're faced with the prospect of, at least now there'll never be another referendum on recognition. I don't say that because it's spiteful or anything else, I think it's truthful. After what happened to the Prime Minister, no Prime Minister's going to do that again. And you'll never get a referendum while a Liberal Party exists. So hopefully, look at this, the start of their demise. Everyone will forget just how painful they are. But I think the difference in the campaign was starkly simple. I think that yes was for unity, love and hope, and no was for disunity, for hate and for fear. And fear won out. The disinformation campaign, which was brought out over that time, was we didn't see it coming. Maybe we should have. There was a decision taken that we should stay high and not go low. Maybe we should have. But we can have all this sort of debates, it doesn't matter. One thing, we're not in the dirt with that. But the other thing was embodied in that was all of the corporates and civil society and community groups across the country all said yes. And their support will never be forgotten either. The only response to no campaign was to try and shoot the messenger. How dare they? What are their voters think? And I'm sad to say that the media were implicit in this. They never questioned it. They let false facts go through as truth. Never questioned it, never pushed back. They're all out there now writing, many of them said it in today's paper. They're all trying to write stories to relieve themselves of their burden. But their grandkids will do it. The other thing that came out of this was the great Australian, I think, silence was always based. What happened in the referendum is the Great Australian reveal, and now the Great Australian silence. We're going to pretend again there's no racism in the country. We won't be able to actually invest that until we get it. Trying to get onto these ones at the moment. And I don't want to talk too long, so I'd rather get to questions, because questions is about a conversation what to have about what your feelings are, where we're going to do this. But I think that it was really lost today, I think, little crowd, little brain, little eyes, he actually came out and said no. He heads up the Squatters Party, so we call it. He came out and said what it was, and then of course Dutton ran along with it because he wanted to, the only thing you get kicked out of the meeting around the head with was the voice. And he succeeded in doing that. But I think I've had many calls from people who voted no over the last 2 weeks. Could have been more magnanimous, but my response was bring someone who cares. But I think this referendum sacrificed political expediency, try and tear the opposition government down. Damage the government, but they've moved on. It's one thing I think people in the campaign were a bit disappointed about on the referendum night. First words out of the government was that the people got it right and racism didn't play a part. Both statements are wrong. People didn't get it right and racism did play a part. That's not to deny that the people have spoken, and we hear that we heard that loud and clear. We've got to move on from that now. Again, Cathy's already mentioned we've got to pick up in second 2 parts of the Uluru statement, which is treaty and truth. How we do that's going to be immensely difficult. The path to a treaty and truth telling is through a voice. We don't have some that level the playing field we advocate for and put it in place. It's going to be immensely difficult to do it. The state government's really walking back. I suppose in political reality, as soon as someone sees a 70-30 vote against you, they end up to do what the 70% want. Or what the 70% was, what advance tells them they want. The other point we're going to know about all the people who voted no, the people who campaigned for no, are all the same ilk. A no is a no is a no. Whether you're the Advance Party, whether you're the Liberal Party, or the other one. Squatters, and whether you're a Mundine or a Price or any of those politicians, there was always a no, whatever your reason. And many people are searching for a reason to say no. And then people get upset when you actually say, well, they said, I didn't know. I said, well, aren't you bright enough to find out? It's a real question. And they get upset and say, oh, you called me stupid. And I said, not really. You confirmed that with your own words. But the vote itself was what, 60-40, but again, you've got a whole lot of the 40%. That's 6.2 million people. That's not an insignificant amount of people. When Big Cathy's also mentioned 68,000 volunteers around. That's an enormous show of support, people who actually got up and did things every day. So we've got to make sure we capitalise on that and move forward. There's actually some other figures in that too. I think that well, 10% of people didn't vote. Didn't bother turning up on the day. Well, that's another point. But I think Australia's now placed itself as a country that's stuck in history. Can't acknowledge First Peoples, and can't step forward, so it's stuck. It'll be taken forever by this decision. I know people have done that for a time. Well, the task itself was a big one. We now have what, 44 referendums and 9 fails. 8 successes. That's what it's been. I don't think there'll be a referendum in the next 50 years. Politicians have seen what it does and how it divides. And the division is the way that the opposition are going with this. But we have to go on with treaty and treaty. We're meeting now behind the scenes, but forms around the country to work out where our next steps are. And we know we have to get out there quickly to actually get back to our supporters. And never be forgotten just how much support was there. We suffered a fairly major setback, but in the end, we can't stop trying because this is for the kids. We don't have another generation of children being the same position we are now. We can't kick the can down the road. There's putting pressure on Labor and those other issues, and I think we've got to move away from the tried and true things that have been going in the past about how we invest people's issues. Close the gap's not working, not in this current format. They talk about 30 billion, which is actually 6. They just can't count. For the Liberals. That's how much money is being spent every year, and that should be a better spend. Go back and start capitalising it, getting in place. But I don't think I can say much more about that other than to answer your question when they come forward. But everyone talks about this being a major setback, and it is, and it's really revealed what the country feels like. But the country's scared most of the time. They've been lulled into the sense of being told what's wrong, what to fear. And if others get something, you lose something. In part of this process, I've sort of did a fair bit of travel. And staying in motels and going to clubs and pubs and doing presentations all the time is that Sky News plays all the time. Not that people so full of hate and that's all they put. That's reporters. In their effort to provide balance, they missed the They're actually promoting their campaign. And they don't have been told about it. We'll see. So it's probably all to say with it, except to answer your questions.
So thank you very much, Geoff. It's great to see this audience, and I know most people in this audience have campaigned. So I suggest we do have a break for 10 minutes, come back just at 1:45, actually, just 8 minutes or so, and come back with your questions and your comments about all the experiences we've had and how we're going to go forward together. Thanks very much. Can you cope with that, Cathy?
Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. Just going to have a break.
Well, the thing is that, I mean, it's not very good for the live stream, right?
I know, but I think the audience needs it.
Yeah, well, I can't stop it.
Yeah, just keep it running.
Yeah.
We can edit the whole thing later, maybe.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Right. A glass of water. Oh, yeah.
No, we can show things here, right?
What's that?
But no, we can show things here. I've got to show you some videos.
Yeah. I haven't asked them about that, but it's really good. Yeah. Yeah. What? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, everybody, we'll get coming to the Q&A. Okay, everybody, thanks very much for your attention. We've got a lot to talk about. I don't, you don't have to say everything tonight, but please be in the conversation about where we're going. It's part of the topic tonight is making our future. So let's try to get the ball rolling. With this Q&A session, we want people to say their name when they're going to make a speech into the microphone, ask a question, and there's a maximum of 2 minutes, which is pretty generous. But we do want a question. So if you're having a comment, always end it with a question and tell us who, of Geoff and Cathy or both of them, you want to answer it. So I think that's all the warnings. I'm going to give the microphone to Stephen to carry around, and I'll do the camera work because we're live streaming on YouTube at the moment. Okay. I hope anyone who had the 10-minute break is still with us. So let's get started. Who wants to make the first question or comment? Okay, Matt. No. Yeah, no.
Okay, thanks. Maxine Sharkey, I'm a teacher and a unionist.
You go. Okay.
I you know, what do you say when you ask? But my union committed completely to voice truth in that order. I thought the Uluru dialogues, the Uluru statement were a phenomenal piece of democracy and consultation and negotiation. I was shocked that no state was in yes, that shocked me. And given that, I want to ask about truth telling because truth telling is so important. When we fought to change the curriculum in schools, we had to put up with the whole black armband of theory. You try to tell the truth and no one listens. It's difficult to make people hear. So how do we go? Yes, well, it's a huge question, but I'm interested in truth telling. I have to say at one point as well, if you didn't want a voice, you're not going to like truth telling either, you know? So where do we go? How do we go into that? Sorry for that question.
Very good. Thank you. I think truth telling is important, but we've got to have a bit of a rational view about it. We've had truth telling all the time. We've had the Green and Home report. We've had the Royal Commission reports. We've had the Little Children's Safety report. The response to that was intervention. But to get truth telling, not only do we have to have truth telling itself, but we have to have someone to be promoted, supported, and pushed through. That was the idea of the voice. But now we should have to make the right mission and go through. We've got to push that. Get out there, everyone, maintain a network and try and get the truth telling out there. It can be a painful process, but it can be liberating. We've got to make sure it gets out and becomes part of our culture. We actually find out the truth, admit it, not just deny it, but move on from it. I think it's an opportunity we can't let it go by. Maybe it's the only way we convince the 6% that there's something that they don't know.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just emphasise Geoff's point that you can't have truth telling without a concerted campaign supported by the government. There's a responsibility with the government. Sure, there's been studies before, but if people don't pay attention to the news, a lot of people don't, they miss it, goes over their head. We can't just have campaigns focused on kids because we don't have 20 years to wait till those kids mature. We've got to educate the broader community. They need to hear the stories of people. You know, I met an elder not far from my community, and she told me about how her grandmother survived the massacre by diving into a stream that went underground. Sounds, you know, sounds a little strange. A few years later, I was reading about sacred sites around the Eatock site, and sure enough, that's where her country was, and there was a sacred site where the stream went underground. That's where her grandmother survived, how her grandmother survived when all the rest were massacred. Those stories, that truth needs to be told. That will drive an acceptance, I believe, of the need for peace talks, for a treaty to be negotiated. I agree with Geoff, the Makarrata Commission needs to be established, and the fact that there's no framework for that, that leaves it wide open to have representatives from across the country be placed, have representatives in that Makarrata Commission to develop and negotiate a fair treaty for First Nations people. Thanks for that question.
Really answer that. I mean, I think the other way is how we do truth telling as well. I mean, I think Rachel Perkins done a marvellous job with her documentary series, and she did be commended for that. I mean, if you watch those shows, if you're not moved by that or understand it, maybe not you. But those sorts of things, the various techniques we'll follow, it's not just the formal Royal Commission type issues. But the fun stuff, the work of Rachel does and many others We're going to concentrate on food.
So who's next? Go there to Maria.
Hi, Marianne Maguire, community activist forever, and especially your reconciliation for responsibility. I was shocked at the lack of challenge of the misinformation and the statements from politicians that came out, particularly in the past months. We were overseas for a while, and the new campaign was just in your face in such a shocking way. And nobody really ever challenged it right away when it was on the media, including ABC. And I am wondering, how can we get organizations such as Principals Association, Vice Chancellors Associations, and so on, to speak up when a person like Dutton can say, if you don't know, won't know. I mean, that's just one example that I think is a slap in the face of everybody, to be ashamed that they can get away in this country with such utterance. It is against anybody who wants to learn and teach. It is at the fundamentals of our society and of democracy. And there's endless other examples of that. How can the institutions be so weak that they don't speak up? And Dutton is so tricky, and the Trump method of marketing interesting, he just gets away with anything, saying the Prime Minister should apologize because it's his failure. And he should apologize for his failure. It has never anything to do with what Adam did, etc., etc. You can tell I'm mad. I feel shame of the country's intellectual, educational commitments. And I wonder how Frank Stilwell, who has been at the forefront of many of these issues, and one thing after another gets destroyed. There is no more resolution center at the Peace and Conflict Study Center at the university, and we allow it to happen, and hardly anybody speaks up about it. Anyway, sorry.
Thanks. That's another good question, and I think we do need to demand truth in political advertising. It's outrageous. Some of the blatant lies that have been told, the stoking of racism, and it's happened before. We saw it with Marva, people saying that you would lose your backyard, and it's happened again. I think we also need to take legal action. I know the man's name on 2SM. I heard it. I know the date it was broadcast, and we'll be following up on that and hopefully get some publicity around that as well, because those people have to be held to account. But we do need to complete advertising.
Thanks, Maria. I think that's actually one of the big things coming out of this is how to combat misinformation and lies. I mean, one of the debates we're having when the Geoff was going through, we wanted the misinformation and advertising, license to advertising legislation we brought in before the referendum, but the statement by Labor was to say no. We'll do it after. That's one major move we had. But the government, I saw Paul Fletcher of the government ministers on a stage private election saying that they as ministers and politicians have a constitutional right to lie. And that's how blatant they were. They admit it and they take pride in it. And if anything, one of the good things coming out of this, there's an increased focus on civics. People are taking much more interest in it. Maybe that's the others we can start talking about that. I mean, question time of Parliament's a joke. The way Parliament's behaving, it's on to account. That's both sides. But the government's already signalled it's going to bring in the misinformation and critical people have advertised legislation. Advance, who is the body who's bankrolling the China Right No campaign, have already said that's their next target. Make sure that goes down. But CPAC, there's Advance, the IPA, the CIS, they're all Liberal Party think tanks. That's what we've got to focus on, and they're the sorts of things we're going to get into. This is the next stage. We're going to correct misinformation, and we have to start by putting in place legislation to do it and increasing cities. I mean, we're a lucky enough country, people don't worry about the Constitution, don't worry about how our parliament works. They say they hate politicians, but they trust them to do everything, and they do that call to account. And the only other one that's got to start doing that is the media. All the media do is do gotcha moments. I was watching this morning, they were talking about one item, and there was great division. We have to get a better standard of journalists.
Okay. Okay. Next, go to Bob and then Pat.
Bob Atkinson, for 50 or so years as a political activist, one of the things that is really pissing me off is the apparent inability of non-Indigenous Australia to sustain a permanent organisational basis for supporting Indigenous rights. Around the 67 referendum, we had a national organisation called Cathy. It survived a couple of years beyond the referendum years. Around 1988, the bicentennial, there was a massive mobilisation by both Indigenous and non, but no organisational survivorship out of it. In the mid-90s, out of Nardo and WIC and the Bring Them Home report, we, for the first time in a long time, had the beginnings of a long-lasting national network of organisations among non-Indigenous people. Organisations like ANTAR, the Reconciliation Network, and the Reconciliation Groups Network in many states, made a skeleton on which organisations could hang. And that survived for a decade and a half, better part of 2 decades before it eroded away again. So we were left again this time with starting from scratch. And we spent the first 6 months talking to each other about and revving each other up, even though we'd had 6 years since the statement, the Uluru statement, to prepare. And I'm just tired of going back to scratch each time. Now, I think we've got to really think hard, whether it's in the non-Indigenous area, about what form of organisation we erect and sustain permanently as an ongoing organisational and liaison basis that's not going to just fade away so that we don't start from scratch again in the future. We've also got to think about the incredibly valuable roles played by local reconciliation groups, some of which still survive, but many of which have faded away, particularly in the outer regions of the cities and in the country towns. We had 50 groups across New South Wales at one stage, and they gave a presence for this struggle in towns which hadn't seen anything from the non-Indigenous side for a long time. So I think we've got to think not only about what we want government to do, but what we as a constellation of organisations can do, and about how we sustain those brave people who came out in the outer suburbs and in the regions for yes, and consolidate that force for the future. Question is, any comments?
I think you're right. I mean, Cathy was the real catalyst behind the 67 referendum. That is when it got up. Reconciliation and the groups that came out with their parliaments before have been strong groups. They're still there today. And we tend to not support them in the way and not get together. There's a lesson to the future. In terms of reconciliation, I think the local groups do a marvellous job. They leave on Saturday night, on Monday night. And actually, they're still there fighting and advocating for issues. It's still the horrible local relates together to continue to operate. And I started to forget this referendum not everything. Did a marvellous job. There's ones in every state, but they raise some money depending on their support, where they are. Strong. But I suppose I'll be a bit critical of the national reconciliation process. I think it's all nice stuff. We say the nice things, but don't challenge anyone. Then you've got to get more hard-headed and focus on what the real issues are, take the government on. At the moment, they're cutting the conscience of those claims who don't really care. We're doing enough. It's got to be more hard-headed, and I think coming out of the referendum is being nice is not enough. Asking it's got to get more hard-headed and focus on that. People who are hard-hearted don't listen. They've got to talk to their head. I think that's what the reconciliation movement has got to live on. I hope they're pushing what they're doing at the moment. But the local groups are still out there. They're the ones that give us hope and support.
That's another good question. There has been talk of sort of people in the National Congress of Australia's First Peoples. Now, I myself have reservations about that. Given that the National Congress relied on philanthropic funding, which in itself compromises just how strongly it can represent Aboriginal communities. If you're asking corporations for funding, it makes it very difficult to question corporations' dealings with Aboriginal communities. It also had 3-chamber representation that was fixed, with a few representatives on each. So we can have broad representation across Australia. And we've since seen the National Coalition of Peaks established. So that then gives representation with bodies and organisations. They have a body and you know, do excellent work advocating for the service provision that they do. But there is a real need for a governance body. I think the opportunity is going to be taken, whether it's through the Makarrata Commission and establishing representative structure in that can help drive those issues around treaty and truth-telling. We do need more input into policy, and that's critical. One of the real strengths of the voice, which I feel a real loss for, is actually the levels of representation at the local level, the regional level, to national level. And it wasn't just representation, but accountability back down the line to those local communities. So I think we've got to come think long and hard, and we've got to encourage the Labor government while it's in power to address this hazard of a gap in a lack of governance, because it's not good enough. We need our governance structures.
Yeah. Okay, Pat.
Thanks.
Your name.
Oh, sorry, my name's Pat. I wanted to raise this issue about treaty or treaties, and it links to the idea of truth-telling as well, because it seems to me that what non-Aboriginal people have to do in particular, as well as with First Nations comrades, is to do more stuff at the local level about truth-telling. And I have seen some examples in regional areas and country towns where people have got together and looked at their own local history. And it seems to me that also forms the basis of local, feeding into local treaty structures. And I just wondered if you wanted to comment about that, because I do think the fact that some state governments have taken initiatives about treaty based on that sort of process, and there's also been some local initiatives, is something that we could perhaps build on, both truth-telling and treaties. So just comment on that. Thanks.
Whoever's first.
Yeah, treaty or treaties, I think we actually need both. We need treaties with local communities, local nations, recognising that there's also a lot of nation building that needs to happen and that that's an ongoing long-term process. Communities have been devastated, have been decimated by and many people have dispossessed the country. So you can't only have nation building treaty process with nations, you need to also look regionally, but importantly, people need to develop a national treaty as well. The similarities of oppression for all the many nations across Australia, in order to negotiate with the federal government, it's the body that's claiming sovereignty. We do need to come together. We need to coordinate together. And that's how we'll have strength in numbers and with support of allies such as yourself, which is also really people.
Thank you. I think treaty is not really that discussion about open economic commission. Gives us that space to have a national conversation with everyone about it, so we understand what it is. Australia the only nation that hasn't had a treaty with its first people. All other nations had first contact treaties, we're doing post contact treaties. What a treaty was like 250 years after the event, it's a different thing what it's like when the event happened. But I've got to really be some other points. There has been a 20-year absence at the national level. Since the advent of little Johnny, there's been an absence of everything. In that space, states have stepped up and people have advanced the states about advancing treaty arrangements or recognition. That's been a great advance. We can't let that go and die. On those issues, there is good work involved for money. There's Victoria still proceeding, the others are all hesitating. South Australia is still going as well. Again, we've got to make sure we can focus on those issues. But it's about treaties are about recognising the history and the impact of what's happened in the past to understand where we are now and then path forward and addressing unfinished business. I mean, I was going to make the point there were two people, the names were James Cook and Phillip. They were told to treat with the natives. They did not. They were two colonial bandits.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Geoff. Who's next? Good. Say your name.
Hi, my name is Geoff. I'm very concerned citizen. I'm campaigning full time for 1 month for the referendum, and I've never felt so belonging to this country. Campaigning in the federal country for I think there is a groundswell support. We shouldn't let them remove it now. When Elder Dixie said, I think a couple of weeks before the referendum, that even if it fails, we have started. And I think, I'm not sure what word he used, but I think he mentioned something. And I believe we have the reconciliation genie is out of the bottle. And I think our role is to make it grow. Out of the 60% who voted no, I know a lot of them would have voted yes for reconciliation. It was the voice that confused them. And I think that that's partly the campaign. So my question to you is, how can we grow this national movement, this spirit that we have? I was in Honolulu months before the referendum, and I was at the palace of the last monarch, Queen, I can't remember her name, and the Hawaiian heritage band, brass band played, and they had a song called Aloha Oe, which was written by the Queen as a welcoming song, but because of the coup d'etat, it was used as a farewell song, very sad song. And when the Hawaiian band played that song, they announced that the Hawaiian archipelago was taken in a coup d'etat, and to this day they are still fighting. And the sovereign rights have never been ceded to Americans. And I think that when they sang the song, everybody stood up as the song was sang. It was like a national anthem. And I thought that was so powerful. And that's not just done at the parish, that was done in a lot of places. So yeah, just wondering, or just discussing, maybe one of the things we can do is have a minute silence, maybe on the 29th of January or maybe on the 14th of. But I think the other thing is we need to unite the no and the yes, because I think a lot of no people are still poorly considered. Thank you.
I think the point you made before, we've got to capitalise on the rate movement we have now. 6.2 million people is not existing. 80,000 volunteers in the round. People stepped up and supported. We're trying to get back to them now to make sure we capitalise on that and get those groups together before they display. And that's what we're trying to do with the meeting we're having now about the way forward. And at least we've got to build on that movement. I don't think it's lost at all. We're working through constitutional recognition. We'll be through a people's movement, but not through the constitution, not through government. That's all we'll say about it. But, I think recognise that a great number of people support it. Never diminished, never forgotten. I think October 14th will be probably the new day of mourning.
Yeah.
The day of recognition is support.
Yeah, I just agree with that call to get on the streets. We've done it before. We've had 40,000 people march in '88. We've had huge marches across the bridge. Conservative governments were in power at those times. We need to influence the Labor government. We need to put pressure on the Labor government to step up and address these issues. And I also just want to say a thank you to all of those people that did get out and campaign for yes, and let you know we do appreciate your support and we will be calling on you again.
Here we go. Is it Geoffrey?
Good evening. And somebody's to divided nations, which I also belong. And I'd like to address, my name is Geoff, but I'd like to address an observation I've made, which added to the pain of the division, that coming from the Yes campaign, I've heard people from the No feel that they were actually being pontificated upon, being labeled. I mean, in a sense, the Yes campaign is coming from a sense of ascendancy that is looking down on people who were sometimes really seriously thinking of the choices they were about to make. And being treated in such a manner, I've noticed a lot of them became turned off. I understand that the first surveys and a strong yes support, but surprisingly, it turned around. And my question is, what could that approach have been better? Because rather than coming from a position of ascendancy, a position of pontificating to the ignorant, is making it appear that voting for yes is an easy decision, easy a decision to make. Isn't it time that we consider our strategy, our tactics in politics? That's what I'd like to say.
Well, I don't think it came to the point of ascendancy.
No.
It came from a point of the right and decent thing to do. Well, that was what we were trying to look at. No one was. There was a position put that every time someone had a discussion or position, and no campaign's view was then switch that around and say you were saying people. No, that was never said. And people, and one point, even when Marcia Leakey came out and said the No campaign are preaching racism, No campaign turned it around to say that they were calling people who were supporting no new basis. It was not. It switched around and the press, the media did not correct that. He never said that at all. It's just the way it was put out by the people itself. And they campaign was very effective and kept pushing those points. So, but again, there's got to be, I think, more explanation about why we wanted those points and why we thought that the yes campaign was probably was a good thing. But what came out was, we don't know voted no, but there was plenty of information out there. People had to find it. And the issue around disinformation, well, the common one there is it doesn't sound right, it's not. And the more you push back on it, the more it actually reinforced and gave voice and altitude to their no campaign. So we have all our discussions about it, but I don't think it came from a petition to the Senate, it came from this was an ask to explain to people, to give people a say in regions. And that was all it was. The rest of it was political noise. And political noise and the fact that the Liberal and the Country Party actually made a political football and sacrificed the future of Australia of the nation. They're not just having control of people, the nation's actually functions and worthwhile is the fact. So there won't be another referendum. And future campaigns will learn the lessons from those as well. And have to explain more why we're taking these positions. But in the end, it's about one recognising people giving the same land as the people. Points about race going in the Constitution was a third. Was already there. Constitution is surrounded by race. Point about how much it costs. We've got to know one blames on how much it costs to referendum, blame the founding forefathers. They put such a convoluted process in place. All those facts can be out through. Australia is such a lucky country that the great majority don't focus on civics. They don't understand the Constitution. They don't understand processes. And hopefully for this process, more people will. Probably starting with their children.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just make a few similar comments. In terms of looking down on people and playing on the ignorance, I don't think you can go much past the no campaign, Dutton and the no campaign, and Jacinta Price saying that there was no impact of colonisation. I mean, it's just ludicrous. They're saying if you don't know, vote no. I mean, that in itself is demeaning. The no campaign was really based on racism and it wasn't challenged. And that's a great tragedy that people got away with saying some horrendous things and they were never challenged because people were afraid that saying the fact that they were racist would be used against them. It was a race-based campaign. It was a racist campaign. And that's what one is talking about.
Over here, Stephen. We'll make this the last one.
My name's Sarah, and what else did you want to know?
Just who you're going
I live in Annandale.
ask your question.
This is my comment. Because I'm deaf, I haven't heard some of the comments that have been made, so I may be repeating some points. Well, one of the things I'd like to say is to disagree with you about the simplicity of the question. I think it was a very difficult question. I think the term voice is a very difficult concept. It's not a very difficult concept, it's an alien concept. I think I knew over time what it meant. But voice to me is what you hear now, voice. But that's not what it meant. And I think it was very important to actually explain that. Unfortunately, we have this absolute horror in this country of the ABC being not independent. I think the ABC failed in its educational role and that it should have actually come out much more strongly. And it could still have been independent, as it's supposed to be, if it had explained things, if it had allowed the community to participate on the ABC and so on and so forth. I don't actually agree that, as you can tell, I'm an outsider. And I don't actually agree that Dutton had an awful lot to do with this. I think that when he said, this will divide the society, I was completely amazed. I can think of no societies that are more divided than this is. I campaigned in Penrith and I campaigned in Annandale. And to be honest, you could have been in 2 different countries. I mean, this is such a divided society. And this simply illustrated to me how divided the society is. You said that that this was a racist vote, and I have a tendency to agree with you on that, because I think that there is a strong racist tendency in this country as an outsider. I couldn't believe that a country could be more racist than the UK, but I actually think it is more racist than the UK. And I feel that this manifested itself in the vote. Gosh, I was going to say something else, but because I've not got the microphone in the right place, I've been a bit put off. No, what was I going to say? Forgotten. Sorry. I am old. So there's my contribution up till now.
Okay.
But I really liked what we said about Hawaii. Was it Hawaii? Yes. There's no sense of that. Well, in some respects there is, and in some respects there isn't. It's a very, very complex society, this. And what I feel is that what we haven't done any research yet, but we will, into why people did vote no. We're guessing, or yes, we're guessing by and large. There's been no systematic research so that we can guess, but we don't actually know. But I think it's really very important to know, because I think that will help us the next time. And that's so very, very important. Thank you.
Check.
Okay. Thank you for your question. Quite a number of points. On the first one, I don't know how people could have made it in my voice. That's complex. I'm not going to really go to. The other one, I agree with the ABC, but they failed in the mission visibly. In their effort to give balance, they gave it no balance. They let false facts go through as truths and reinforce that in the minds of everyday voters. I think they should be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
But that's the head of the ABC, not much longer, I hope. I do think Dutton had a role. He criticised this totally. He removed bipartisanship straight away and made it and lined up Labor and Liberal. And that's it straight away. And this country is divided. This country is the only country that doesn't have a Bill of Rights, Western democracy. Other countries got to look at it and say, what the hell? I don't understand it. That's because in this country we've never had storm on our own soil. I think Darwin got bombed once and I think they torpedoed the ferry in Sydney Harbour. That's it. That's the only trauma we've had, the Indigenous trauma. So we're a very lucky country in that respect. And most people live in a bubble. And the campaigns of fear work very well. They fear that they're going to lose something in an election. It happens that they're either someone's getting more money than you, or it's law and order. They're the two main ones that run it, and they win elections all the time. That's where politicians are. I think we are a divided country because I think most of the country is in a bubble. But they don't take any, I agree. They don't respect civics, they don't participate much, they live day to day. That's because we're a very lucky country. Sometimes being a very lucky country is not a good thing. Not telling you the story. The other point I think you made was we'll be next time. I don't think there will be next time. I don't think our lifetime will see a referendum again. And there certainly will not be one on Indian matters. That chance is gone. That was a forever referendum, and that's what we have to do. And trying to think of something else is not good. So we've got to move on with other strategies. There are other ways of doing this. We have to be inventive, we have to work together. Capitalising on the massive support we did get is one way of doing that and make sure that's capitalised and put together. So again, we can't diminish the support we got. And it's not diminished by the 6% who didn't get it right. And I think racism is a big issue the country's got to deal with on a overriding basis. Not just about this referendum, but overall. I think what's worrying this country used to be run by really white men. And they really white men are very scared about what's happening. Look at the parliament, it's brown. Look around the states, there are women. There are people from all different races and adventures. In this country now, the current demographics are that I think Sydney will be dominated from a Chinese descent and Melbourne by India. That's the way the demographics are going. And that's worrying people. Not dealing with it, they're refusing to acknowledge it. The country is now a multicultural country and becoming part of Asia, which it should have been in the first place, not part of England.
Thanks. In relation to Dutton, I think he did actually play a role. He wasn't questioned on his allegation that the voice would cause division in the community. He wasn't questioned when he suggested that the voice would put Aboriginal people in the Constitution when they're clearly already there. I think mainstream Australia, out in the western suburbs, working class people, they've got their economic concerns, paying their house, inflation's rising. They were concerned Aboriginal people might get something more than them. The voice was to provide input into policies impacting Aboriginal people. We know that there's 15 lobby groups in Canberra, lobby groups of the mining, lobby groups of pharmaceutical companies and corporations. So providing a voice to Aboriginal people on service provision, pretty modest request, I think. So it's a great disappointment. But I think we've just got to focus on the assertion of our rights and continue to drive that home and demand that the Labor government respect the rights that are allocated, that are set in the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and call on all the supporters and allies across this country, those 6.2 million people, to get out on the streets and support and demand action and demand support for a treaty and more structural change. Thank you.
So thank you very much to Cathy and Geoff. I want you all to give that a round of applause. I want to thank all of you who've made your comments and put your questions. This is the culture we have to have. This is really why politics in the pub exists, so that we can stay as a community and go forward. So thank you very much. Now, the last Politics in the Pub for this year will be on November 28th, the last Tuesday of November, and the topic is going to be about Palestine. It's genocide in Gaza, carnage in Israel, what prospects for peace. And the speakers are two Palestinians, a woman called Sama Sabawi, she's a playwright and poet, and a man called Shami Badra, who has spoken in Politics in the Pub before, but right now he's the convener of the Coalition for Justice and Peace in Palestine. He's from Gaza. So I want to encourage you to be there, and we're trying to put together a program for the first half of next year as soon as we can and get it to you before the end of the year. Join the Politics in the Pub Facebook group. It's the best way to actually know when the next thing is on. I know we've got a lot of confusion with websites and messages about Politics in the Pub, so my apologies, I can't do anything about it. Thank you very much. One thing I'd like to say about truth telling, Stephen is famous now for trying to tell the truth about governing Macquarie's borders, which led to the massacre at happened. He's going on trial again on November 16 at the Downing Centre. It's Monday morning. So I think you'll hear more Thursday, November 16. And so maybe you'll hear about that and maybe we can get some changes happening. The Sydney City Council, he's told me, is going to be reviewing the rules about statues. So, yeah, he's been plugging away, hearing in court a lot. So truth telling, that's a message. Makarrata is a message. Pressure on the Labor government is a message. Creating our own groups is a message. So that's we're grateful tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a tough thing. It's a tough
Okay, Cathy, we're going to leave. Okay.
thing.